Hello, this is book 2 for July 2020. Our libraries are open, so that's good for me. I think I'm going to go back. There are some courses that I have. I want to go back and redo them, and I need the library for that. And it's very cool. Everything's shielded up and COVID prepared, so that's good news. But we're reading about the Freemasons in the United States because these organizations play a big part in our society. All organizations do play parts, but these play a big part. Secret societies, they don't need to be always need to be sinister, but you have a lot of secret groups, masonry, and not to equate the two, but fraternal orders, sororities, so on and so forth. And so, if we're going into a new world order, we need to understand these things. The Freemasons in America at the end of the 19th century succeeded in doing this only because they strictly enforced the rule banning political arguments in the lodges. It was a remarkable achievement to form an organization in which men who had played a prominent part in these bitter disputes and had fought in a civil war on opposite sides could meet in friendship. But one result was that Freemasonry in the United States, unlike anywhere else in the world, enforced racial segregation. At a time when German lodges had been persuaded to admit Jews, and when British lodges in India, under pressure from the Duke of Sussex and other leaders of English Grand Lodge, reluctantly agreed to admit Indians to white lodges. The lodges in the United States excluded African Americans. If they had admitted them, the former slave owners and the supporters of white supremacy would have denounced the Freemasons as a band of radical revolutionaries and nigger lovers. And the Freemasons in the South would again have become victims of violent attacks, including lynchings from reactionaries. And people say, why do you always have to bring race up? Race is in everything in this society. Once you decided to racialize labor and to racialize capitalism and to racialize that, you racialized every part of the society because you had to make us less human. And if we were less human so you can use us for labor, we had to be less human everywhere else. You can't make us be human over here, less human over there, because then your free labor thing won't work. So that's why we always got to bring up race because it's everywhere. During the American War of Independence, when American liberals in the North worked with slave owners in the South in the struggle against Britain, the British, although they themselves owned black slaves in the West Indies and were engaged in the slave trade, encouraged the slaves of the revolutionaries in Georgia and South Carolina to escape from their masters and join the British garrisons in the ports they held, to work there as laborers. They accepted some of these runaway slaves as members of a British military Freemasons lodge, though no African American had been allowed to join any American lodge. But the man who played the leading part in developing Freemasonry among African Americans was not a slave. Prince Hall was the son of an English officer and an African American woman of French descent who had been freed from slavery. He was born in Massachusetts in 1748 and became a Methodist minister in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In 1775, he was accepted as a member of a British military lodge, the first African American to become a Freemason. Despite this, Prince Hall supported the struggle for American independence against the British. And when George Washington and the American military leaders allowed slaves to enlist in the Revolutionary Army, promising them their freedom if they did, Prince Hall encouraged African Americans to enlist, and may possibly have done so himself. In 1791, the first Grand Lodge of African Americans was formed, with Prince Hall as Grand Master. After his death in 1807, the African American lodges were named after him. For many years, there was no collaboration between the mainstream and Prince Hall lodges, but after the movement in favor of equal rights for African Americans developed in the 1960s, several mainstream white lodges entered into visiting relations with Prince Hall lodges. Others refused to do so, however, and no step was taken towards merging the lodges of the two Masonic organizations. In most countries of the world, there have at times been divisions and splits between Freemasons lodges, which have led to the creation of two rival Grand Lodges. But in the United States, the number of Grand Lodges far exceeds any other countries. Apart from divisions between the mainstream lodges for whites only and the Prince Hall lodges for African Americans, the American respect for states' rights has led them to organize Freemasonry on a state, not federal basis. Whereas in Great Britain, all the English lodges are under English Grand Lodge, with separate Grand Lodges for Scotland and Ireland. In the United States, every state has its own Grand Lodge. They are, however, linked together by the system of Albert Pike, created at the end of the 19th century. So there you have it. Again, racism in the Mason Lodge, and that's what we're dealing with. Until next time, I want to say thank you for supporting me. Take care of your mind, take care of your body, and be safe. Oh, and if you're wondering what this is, I donated my body. I'm an anatomical donor. So when I die, they'll take it to NYU to study, to use for students. Until next time, take care.